Hey e-commerce marketing podcast listener, I wanted to let you know that we have created 16 e-commerce marketing videos for you. You can download these free videos by visiting ecommercemarketingpodcast.com/videos or by texting the word videos to +1 480 418 1411. These step-by-step video marketing tutorials will teach you how to drive more traffic to your e-commerce website, how to get more backlinks to your e-commerce website, and how to optimize your website to get more paid customers. Get the videos right now by visiting ecommercemarketingpodcast.com/videos or by texting videos to +1 480 418 1411. Welcome to the e-commerce marketing podcast. Today's guest is David Meerman Scott. He is the best-selling author of the book, The New Rules of Marketing and PR. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Hey, thanks a lot, Robert. It's great to be here.
Can you please give us a quick background about yourself, being an author, writing, being on the speaking circuit, and any other businesses you've been involved in?
Sure. So I started off in a bond trading desk on Wall Street in New York, and I hated it, and I was a bad bond trader. So then I moved into the real-time news business, and I was working for companies like Dow Jones and Reuters for a number of years, and those two experiences in my career of working on a bond trading desk and working in the real-time news business gave me a really deep understanding of real-time business, the instant engagement that people have, because I was able to experience that even before the web, because a bond trading desk is all real-time. If you're making trades, you have to trade instantly. You have to trade when there's news. You have to trade when the time is right. Same thing in the real-time news business. You know, if a story is breaking, the reporters have to write about it. So that was a great experience for me. And then in 2002, I was fired from my job. So that gave me the opportunity to start and do my own thing. So I started writing books. I've written 10 books so far. The one you mentioned, The New Rules of Marketing and PR, is the one I'm best known for. It's sold 350,000 copies in the English language and is available in 29 other languages, from Albanian to Vietnamese. As well, I speak all over the world to all kinds of different organizations. And I sit on the advisory board of a number of different companies, including HubSpot. I've been on their advisory board since the very beginning, when they were just no customers at all. They just passed the 30,000 customer point. So my whole thing is that I'm a huge believer in the idea that modern marketing works best when it's real time. In other words, modern marketing works best when you are engaged with your audience when the moment is right, not when it's right for you, but when it's right for your buyers.
Okay, and we can get into more detail about that. The first question I had is, what is the one thing that you would suggest an e-commerce business right now to be focusing on their marketing to try and attract more customers and get more sales?
So I think, getting back to this idea of real time, I think that it's really essential that you focus on creating really great content that drives people into your e-commerce store, whether that's video-based content or text-based content, photographs. It's the content, it's the images, it's the information you provide that will be the difference between whether somebody pushes the button to buy the product or whether they just go away. And that's really the best competitive advantage for you, is creating something interesting. But I go even further than that, because that's not a new concept. The further I go is that the content that you should create is best when it's tied to something going on in the news, is a great way to create real-time content that then educates and informs people when the moment is absolutely correct. So let me give you an example of that. I call this concept, by the way, newsjacking. And newsjacking, brief definition, is the art and science of injecting your ideas into a breaking news story. And the way it works is that you look at what's going on in the news, what's going on in mainstream media, and what are those breaking stories that are interesting. How can you then tie your brand, and if you have an e-commerce site, if it's in a particular type of focus e-commerce site on a particular product, that's cool, or if you have a particular geography that you sell into, that's cool, whatever it might be. But whenever there's a news story that you can tie to your brand, then that's really awesome. An example of that is a company called Cash for Purses. What Cash for Purses does is an e-commerce site. They both buy used handbags and sell used handbags. And so the entrepreneurial founder of this company's name is Trent Silver, and Trent has worked with me on this concept of newsjacking, and he understands it really well, and he ties his brand to news stories. So, for example, he learned that Lindsay Lohan was having money troubles, and you might have seen that story when it appeared. You know, Lindsay Lohan was all over the news because she was having trouble paying her rent, and she hadn't gotten any movie deals in a couple of years, and she was somebody who was struggling. So Trent created a blog post where he offered to buy Lindsay Lohan's used handbags. Now, the reason that's newsjacking is because he created a piece of content that was focused on a news story of that moment, the idea that when Lindsay Lohan was having money troubles. He then sent a link to that idea of Lindsay Lohan's money troubles, and he would buy her used handbags to a number of different media outlets, and he got a whole bunch of responses. So Radar Online wrote about it, People Magazine wrote about it, Bazinga wrote about it, a whole bunch of different websites. Huffington Post wrote about it. A whole bunch of different websites then wrote news stories, mainstream media news stories, where they talked about Lindsay Lohan's money troubles and that how selling her used handbags could be the key to her financial freedom. And this was cool because the journalists who are writing those stories are always looking for a new angle on a story. And here's Trent Silver providing them with a new angle on the Lindsay Lohan story. And then that drives people into Trent's business because every one of those news stories had a link to his business, Cash for Purses. He told me that at the peak of these stories, he was getting over 1,000 hits on the website every hour as a result of this. And he had 8,000 online leads from this, and he ended up selling $250,000 worth of new business, $250,000 worth of new business on his online e-commerce site, just from this one example of newsjacking. So that's the concept of newsjacking. You look at Google News and other places to find out what's happening in the news, and then if there's a news story that's breaking, and it's something related to the business that you have, the type of product you sell in your e-commerce site, that's when you can create content to tie your brand to that story.
Yeah, and I actually saw an example of this recently when the whole United thing happened with the doctor.
Yes.
Emirates immediately, I think the next day, had an ad. They had a video ad talking about flying the friendly skies because the CEO had said something about the Gulf states and their airlines.
Yes.
And Emirates the next day took a shot back saying, hey, we are from the Gulf states, but we actually do live up to the standard of flying the friendly skies.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's an example of news.
So that's a perfect example of newsjacking. Of course, that's not an example for an e-commerce site, although I guess it is because you can buy your tickets on Emirates on an e-commerce site. But yeah, that's the idea. The idea is you have to be very aware of what's going on in the media. And then it's really important that you have to be quick. Right now, as we're recording this podcast, it's about 3 weeks after that United Airlines incident. That's way too late to newsjack that particular story. You have to do it very quickly. You have to do it the same day that news story breaks, or possibly the next day, but it really does need to be quick. The faster you get it out, the more people who will see it, because the more interest it will generate. The other thing is that not every time that you newsjack a story, it's going to have an amazing result, because you never really know what's going to interest members of the media and what's going to interest your potential customers. So you have to give it a bunch of different shots. You have to try again and again and again. In my own case, I've newsjacked a number of times to generate business for me. And so I want to sell books. I want to sell speaking engagements. I want to sell my online courses. And so I'll give you an example. I've been writing about Donald Trump's use of his marketing skills. I've been writing about for almost 2 years now. The first time that I said Donald Trump was the best marketer within the presidential elections was in August of 2015. That was even before the primaries. And I basically predicted that because he was the best marketer, he was likely to win. And I wrote about Donald Trump on my blog a number of times. So when Donald Trump did in fact win, on election night, November 8th, they predicted that he was going, they forecast that he was going to win, and then I immediately started writing my blog post, and 2 hours later I published my blog post at 4:30 in the morning. And that blog post ended up getting tons of attention because Donald Trump was not supposed to win. And so the media was like, the reporters wanted to have somebody they could quote about why Trump won and why it was predicted that Clinton was going to win. And I said, well, Trump was the best marketer, and he was using marketing techniques, especially Twitter, that the other candidates didn't use. And the media and the pollsters misjudged how important Trump's marketing was. And then a lot of different publications ended up quoting me. I was quoted in ZDNet, I was quoted in Marketing Magazine, I was quoted in a whole bunch of other publications. And that then drove speaking requests, because as people were reading the articles about me and quoting me about why Trump won because it was great marketing, I was invited to speak at conferences. And in fact, last week I spoke at the Public Affairs Council in Washington, D.C., in front of several hundred of the largest companies in the United States public affairs vice presidents. And that speaking gig was generated exclusively because I newsjacked Donald Trump's winning the election. And so that's what it takes. It takes following the news and then creating a piece of content instantly. It could be a video, it could be a blog post, it could be a tweet, but putting out a piece of content instantly when the moment is right.
And what are some of the tools that you use for newsjacking that you think people should be using for newsjacking? So things like Google Alerts, etc.
Yeah, so the main thing is I actually do not use Google Alerts. The reason is because the best kind of stories you really cannot be prepared for. You know, who would have thought that United Airlines would drag a passenger through the aisle and, you know, break his teeth and make him bleed, and that somebody would shoot it on video? You could never have an alert set up that would give you information about that. So sure, there's no problem using Google Alerts, but you also have to be aware for what I call serendipity, or the happy accidents that you never thought were coming. So what I do, and what I recommend everybody does, is on a regular basis, 2 or 3 or 4 times a day, check Google News. That's news.google.com, but turn off all the personalization. So you're just looking at the basic news feed to see what the hot stories are of the day. The other thing to use is Twitter Moments. So go to the main Twitter page, twitter.com. And then you'll see a button for Moment, which is Twitter's algorithm-driven assessment of what the most popular stories trending on Twitter are. Those two things will give you some really great real-time focus on what's happening. The other thing I do is very, very old school, but I read a print daily newspaper every day. I live in the Boston area, so when I'm at home, I read the Boston Globe. It's delivered to my house. And when I'm traveling, I read whatever the local newspaper is in the place that I'm visiting. And what that does is it gives me a chance to just take a deep dive into what's going on in the world so I can be aware if there's something going on that I can do some newsjacking about.
Okay. And you also have the website newsjacking.com. So yeah. When people visit that website, what are they going to get?
So on newsjacking.com, there's a bunch of free content on there. I have some free information on how to get started with newsjacking. I have some graphics that show how a news story breaks that you can download. And there's also on there a course that I built called Master Newsjacking, and it's an online study course where you can learn all of the details about how to do newsjacking. And the example I shared earlier when we were talking about Trent Silver, Trent is somebody I taught how to use newsjacking, and all the things I taught him are in that course. And as I mentioned earlier, he made $250,000 from newsjacking using the ideas that I taught him. So it's a great way to get noticed. It's a great way to drive business to your e-commerce site.
Other than newsjacking.com, what are the other ways that people can reach you?
So on Twitter, I'm DM Scott. That's DMSCOTT. And if you Google my full name, David Meerman Scott, you will only get me. I use my middle name, Meerman, for my professional work, because there are a lot of David Scotts out there. There's a David Scott who walked on the moon. There's a David Scott who is an Ironman triathlon champion. There's a David Scott who's a member of Congress from Georgia. When I first started my business 15 years ago, I said, hey, I need to be unique on the web. So I started using my middle name. So I'm David Meerman Scott, and I'm the only David Meerman Scott on the web. So that's actually an important lesson for everybody. If you're starting a new e-commerce site, make sure that if somebody enters it into Google that they don't get something else, they only get you. And branding of that site such that it's easy to find on the search engines is essential.
Okay, so even your website, you use the full name, davidmeermanscott.com?
That's it's davidmeermanscott.com. But if you Google David Meerman Scott, you're going to get tons and tons of stuff that points to me. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of hits, and they'll all point to stuff that is about me or my sites or articles that are written about me or whatever.
Thanks, David, for being on the podcast and teaching us about newsjacking. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, the thing that's really cool about this, Robert, is that it's fun. You know, a lot of people who run e-commerce businesses say that they don't like marketing because they don't, it's boring, it's not fun, it costs money. Well, newsjacking is free, number one, and number two, it's fun to do. It's really exciting when you get noticed because of something like this. So that's what I would leave people with, is have some fun with your newsjacking.
Okay, David, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Robert. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the e-commerce marketing podcast. Join the e-commerce marketing podcast Facebook group to learn, connect, collaborate, and grow with other e-commerce marketers at ecommercemarketingpodcast.com/FB. ecommercemarketingpodcast.com/FB. Subscribe to us on iTunes by searching for e-commerce marketing podcast, and please leave a rating and a review. Thank you for listening. See you next time.